I'm Alan Hain, the Lawn Care Nut. Thanks for coming back for yet another Lawns Across America podcast. Hope you guys are having a great week. We are already into September, pretty much the middle of September. September always goes super fast for me because it's the end of my blackout when I'm actually able to sling a little nitrogen again. And so I go through that long summer where I can't get my boost, or I can't give it to my lawn. And then we get to September, and that's only one more month until my blackout ends. If you don't know what a blackout is, here in Florida, we have summer FERT bans. Now, not every county does. This is one of the things about that I've learned is when I talk about something in Florida, even when I tell people, hey, it's not in every county, they just take it as gospel no matter where they live, and it's all in Florida. And what I'm talking about here are in the summer times in Florida, and I want you all to know about it no matter where you live. Because, see, I'm of the belief that you're all going to end up moving here eventually. So even if you live in Illinois, Indiana, New York, New Jersey, or anywhere in between, Nebraska, way out that way, Idaho, I doubt y'all coming this far. Y'all probably stopping in Las Vegas or something, right? or Utah. You guys are all going to Utah. Anyway, everybody else, all the rest of you in the most of the part of the country and what they call the flyover states, you're going to end up here in Florida. So it's good for you to learn about what we do now because it is so different. As I say, Florida is basically the tropics, especially if you're south of I-4 or south of what I call the frost line in South Florida. Then you are in the tropics, and the tropics are a jungle, and the jungle is always trying to retake the land, and we don't have the benefit of a reset button with winter. See, when I lived in Indiana, and I don't mean to sound arrogant or anything like that or to take away from anybody's hard work, but if you live up north and have a cool season lawn, you have it easy. You just do. And that is because you could have the worst year here in 2024. You could go through a major drought, which some of you might have. You can go through a major too much flooding, which is what we're going through. But you get a reset button in winter. The first thing is you can grow a new lawn in 45 days, which we've talked about, which we're going to get back into the pre-germination again. Pre-germination is a real problem in this community, and I think I need to fix it. So if you have pre-germination problems, just keep listening. But, you can fix your lawn easy, and then you get winter as a reset button, so any weeds that were there, the winter's going to kill most of them off. There are some perennial weeds up north, but like creep and Charlie and those, violets. But there are a lot of annuals. And those will all be killed off. So you get winter's reset button. We don't have that down here. The weather never sleeps. The disease never sleeps. The insects never sleep. The lawns don't sleep, but they do slow down. That's the whole thing, right? You have to understand that our lawns have to be adapted in the South, and I'm mainly talking about South Florida, but everybody that has warm season turf, whether you're in Georgia or Texas or Oklahoma, even Louisville, Kentucky has a lot of Bermuda grass. You could still learn from what I'm saying because your grass is still the same grass. It just doesn't have as much sunlight to burn itself through, but it's still going to have the same alpha nature as we do down here in South Florida. Our grasses have to be adapted to the peak time of the year when we have peaked day length, right? When they can really spread, lengthen their cords and lengthen their stakes. Those are called rhizomes and stolons, right? So you can anchor in. I'm getting you a little biblical reference there. But that's what our warm season grasses do. They anchor in and they spread and they take ground and they knit together tight and they do a really good job at choking out weeds. Even at the Freedom Factory right now, the only weed that's getting through with all of the rain, this is in the Bermuda and also in the Citra Blue St. Augustine grass, the only weed that's getting through is yellow nutsedge. Even the Kalinga's having trouble getting through because my grass is so thick. Our grasses, that's a Bermuda and that's a St. Augustine. And then at my house, the same thing. Now, I've got some other problems with dayflower and, a lot of freaking spurge. So I got a lot of weeds coming in, again, because of all the rain. So back to it, our grasses are adapted to keep weeds out, but there are times when weeds get in, and there are times when we have a challenging season. And what we've had in South Florida, now they didn't get this in North Florida. I think North Florida has been abnormally dry, just like my buddy BYD in Georgia. They've had a real bad drought. But South Florida here, West Coast, pretty much most of South Florida, though, has had record rains, record rains. Coming off of last year, a record drought, spring a drought, and then this fall or this summer, a record rains. And that is why my lawn is just completely destroyed. My Palmetto St. Augustine, the biggest lesson I've learned this year with that is I've always known that it is susceptible to gray leaf spot. Listen, every variety of grass is going to have positives and negatives. This is whether you're looking at Kentucky bluegrass or turf type tall fescue. You can get some Kentucky bluegrasses that can do better in heat, right? And by the way, it's not always heat that's what's going to get your cool season grass. It's heat coupled with humidity that burns it down. But some of them can tolerate that a little better. Some have a deeper color. Some are better adapted to resist brown patch disease. They all have some positives and negatives, and there is no perfect grass. Now, there's a genetically engineered grass called Provista that is getting closer, but it's not even perfect. But what I'm trying to get at is that every variety of grass you have is going to have positives and negatives, and you need to know what those are. Now, most of you, if you have cool season grass, you have a mix of just stuff. You don't really know what it is, and that's fine. That's really the best lawn. The best lawn is the mutt lawn when I'm talking about cool season turf, and that mutt lawn is going to be a mix of fescues, rye, and bluegrasses, right? Because then when one fails, the other one picks up. When one's struggling, the other can rage on, that kind of thing. So that's why cool season grass has such an advantage also, because you can grow a cool season lawn in like 45 days. Lots and lots of advantages, winter reset buttons, so many good things that you have. But down here in Florida, where the jungle is always trying to retake that land, we need that thick turf stand. And what's happened is with my palmetto is the gray leaf spot has thinned it out terribly. Oh my gosh. I've always had some gray leaf spot. Now see, I didn't last year. We had a drought and my palmetto looked freaking great all year. But the gray leaf spot this year, because of the record rains, which also brought record, moisture and humidity and nothing drying out, what it's done is the gray leaf spot has just migrated all through the grass. And you can see when you look at my lawn, I'll do a video on this weekend on the Lawn Care Nut channel, but I'm talking about it now because it's on my mind. You can kind of see areas of the lawn that were not damaged prior a few weeks ago are now damaged, because what's happened is as the water flows across that part of the property, well, number one, too much water flow in a record rain year, it washes the roots out of the St. Augustine grass. Just so y'all know, St. Augustine grass, and to an extent, Bermuda for sure, Zoysia for sure, St. Augustine, I don't think Bahia can. Bahia can't! But they can live with almost no roots, because there's some roots somewhere back at the rear of the stolon or at the rear of the rhizome. There are some roots, but really the stolon or the rhizome, I'm talking about mostly stolons above ground, they can creep a long way and not really tack down and just keep going for several inches, even a couple of feet, right? And have grass blades coming up and everything, but they're just not anchored down. That's pretty normal, actually. That happens quite often. Well, what happens when there's constant rain flow, and I'm not just talking about wet soil, I mean flowing water. So my house is a little bit elevated from the street, and so water flows off. That's how all houses are, right? You want the water to drain off. You don't want it to drain towards the house. And so that water is flowing, and because it's raining every day, and y'all have to understand, we sometimes will get 4 or 5 inches in a couple hours. Y'all wait 3 months to get 4 or 5 inches. We get it in a couple hours. The Debbie produced, I think, 20 inches overnight in one day, right? So that's so much water that it's just constantly flowing. The aquifer is full. It's just flowing, and that flow over time will carve the roots right out of the grass. And that's why what happens with my palmetto is you can pull it up and it's like, oh my gosh, is this grubs? And that's fooled me a few times. Because one time it was grubs several years ago. But what I had to do is I had to think, number one, remembering my history, that yes, this always washes out like this. It always has signs of where it pulls up because of the water flow. But this year it's even worse, because not only is the water flow literally just detached the roots, but it's also the gray leaf spot has thinned the palmetto St. Augustine out at the same time. So it's like a double whammy of wet feet. You guys have known, you guys have had plants, house plants that you've gotten too wet and they die from wet feet. This is a similar thing, except it's in big swaths of the grass. It just washes out. The reason I knew it wasn't insects, and I still dug anyway, because what's my first thing I say when you have brown spots is to dig. So I've dug in my lawn and my palmetto. But I knew I had put down a celloprine. This is the little lesson here. I knew I had put down a celloprine for grubs as a preventative. I knew I did that back in the spring. I have a video where I did it. And so I know that I put it down correctly, and I know that it got watered at all of these things. So I have to trust that product, that aceleprine, is doing what it's supposed to do. And so I'm not going to keep thinking I've got a grub problem. I dug in a couple spots, didn't find any, just to reassure myself, but I'm not going any further because I have trust that the aceleprine is working. Does that make sense? Sometimes, this is the lesson. Y'all will put a product down, and then when brown spots persist, you think you need to apply that product again. No, you need to trust that you did it right and it did its job. And if things didn't clear up, then maybe you had the wrong diagnosis, or maybe you just need some patience, right? Grass doesn't regrow in a week. Dead grass doesn't come back to life. And so there's other factors involved, but trust the application you made. You made the application in good faith. Now you need to continue to trust it. And if the problems don't correct themselves, it's something else. And that's what I did. I did the aceleprine. I did a couple dig spots. I realized, no, this is the roots washing out. This is also the gray leaf spot spreading. I can see that visual evidence. And so what I realize is, man, I've just had a year where the cultivar of grass, the variety that I have, the Palmetto St. Augustine, it's just been a banner year of destruction for that variety. Because the Floratam on the other side, it shows a couple signs. And by the way, I've seen this root wash out before, but I've mainly seen it in my grass along the corner of like where a driveway comes together with a sidewalk and there's water that flows across that corner. In rushing storms, that'll wash the roots right out of your St. Augustine grass or your zoysia. But St. Augustine's very susceptible to it. Is that rushing water from driveway to sidewalk in a corner right there? That rushing water there will just wash the roots right out. Here's the thing with that. Also, chinch bug damage, for some reason, will often start at heat zones where there's a sidewalk or a driveway. And the chinch bug damage will then work its way in, and it'll look just like this water flow problem. You'll be like, oh, maybe that's chinch bug, right? So then you got to do like the coffee can test or the soapy water test. These are all things you can Google. What I'm trying to say is it's very difficult to play lawn detective this time of year, but if you have put a product down, I do recommend that you trust it. Now, here's the other thing. One thing I know from experience is my pre-emergents are long gone. The one thing that can degrade a pre-emergent herbicide like prodiamine is too much water, especially soaked ground. Nothing can hang in soaked ground that's constantly wet, that has constant water flowing across it every single day for days on end, that doesn't dry out. There's nothing going to hold in that soil. The acelepryn would, because the acelepryn was just taken in by the plant itself. So the plants will still hold on to that. Different mode of action. But a pre-emergent herbicide like prodiamine is more of a vapor barrier that exists in the soil. And so when the soil is flooded and saturated for long periods of time, it'll break that barrier down. It'll wash it right away. And so you'll see I have a lot of tropical signal grass in my lawn right now. I always have a little bit of breakthrough in some spots, but it's pretty bad this year. And again, that is from those record rains. So that's just a lot of some of the stuff that I'm kind of dealing with. I did get away this week. Somebody commented, man, you're always on vacation, because I always say in my videos, I'm going to go on vacation and we'll take a look at the results when I get back. I've been on 2 vacations this year, 3. I went to 4th of July, Independence Day week. I went to see my boys in Indiana. It's kind of one of our traditions we try to do. And then I went to see my parents over Labor Day weekend just for a couple of days. And then this past weekend, I went on a 4-day cruise on Carnival, on the Carnival Glory. So if you've never been on a 4-day Carnival cruise, I encourage you to go. It is incredibly fun. It is the best people watching, and it's a nice, quick way to get away. And the food is not half bad. I'll tell you what, the food's very good, actually. So I like cruising. I like cruising people. I like people that like cruises. They're very friendly people. You can meet a lot of people. A lot have a good time. I actually read a book. I'm also a big book reader. For some reason, I like to read books when there's a lot of activity around me. I don't like to read books in silence. I like to put on some music in my ears, but if there's like a bar atmosphere around me, I like that. And so Carnival cruise ship, sitting by the pool, super loud, lot going on, people drinking and partying, and I'm sitting there reading a book with some good music in my ears. Just kind of weird. I don't know. Smell of suntan lotion in the air. Who knows, but I enjoy that. But I read this book. I'll recommend it. I'm 50 years old now, so I'm getting to that point where I start to question things, which leads back to my Florida video from last week. I'll give you an update on what I'm working on there. But I read this book. Well, I have 100 pages left to go. It's almost, 400 and something, maybe almost 500, and I got 100 pages left. It's called Chaos: Charles Manson, the CIA, and the Secret History of the 60s by Tom O'Neill. And wow, really interesting. I had known about Charles Manson growing up. I think I must have seen him on 60 Minutes or something, because, I was born in 1973, and so he was alive and in jail when I was still alive. So he was always this pariah, this icon of evil and the occult and everything. And so he'd be on 60 Minutes. They'd do stories on him and stuff. And I don't know, he was just in the public conversation. He's not really anymore. But what you find out is that somehow the CIA was doing secret ops with LSD. And I haven't finished the book yet. I got 100 pages left to go, but it's pointing to that there were some experiments done on Manson and the family that may have proliferated some of the murders that they committed. And by the way, the murders were atrocious, of this pregnant woman and her friends in this house, and Roman Polanski, the producer, it was his wife. I mean, crazy. So there's like some Hollywood kind of stuff in there, which is always interesting and adds some color to any story. So I don't know. I was reading that pretty interesting book. Figured I'd pass that along to y'all. And if you have any good book recommendations that are like that, again, I say I start to question things because that's the government doing some pretty sick kind of stuff. So makes me question other things that are going on in the government, which goes back to the Florida video that I did. If you didn't see it on my channel last week, I made a video just going over my lawn, and I was pretty frustrated in that video because of the way my lawn was looking. But that brought me to also talking about these Florida fertilizer bans. Nothing to do with the problems in my lawn. The FERT bans would not, if we were allowed to use nitrogen, it would not have helped my lawn this year. What would have helped it is for me not to let it get overgrown and leave clumps, which then I think exacerbated a problem that may not have been so bad. And also I should have used fungicides. I tried to get away from the ides, thinking, oh, let's try to, because fungicides, have resistance challenges. And I was like, let's just try not to use fungicides. Let's just try to let the lawn make it through. I should have used the Clary's 3336 and the propiconazole mix. And I think I would have had a fraction of what's going on out there as well. So those are the things, but all of that together just got me thinking about the laws that we have in Florida, these blackout rules where during the summer, you're not allowed to apply nitrogen or phosphorus. And it's not in every single county in Florida. It's mainly coastal counties, or if you have major rivers or lakes in your county, which is a lot of counties in Florida, but it's mainly coastal ones where we have these laws. And so from June 1st until September 30th, 30 days have September. Yeah, April, June, and November. Yeah, so 30 days. So June 1st to September 30th, no nitrogen, no phos. I don't care about the phos. We don't really need that in Florida anyway in most cases. But there is a need for nitrogen. Our lawns are so nitrogen rich and hungry. And I talked about that thick lawn that helps to choke out weeds, and nitrogen is a big part of that, helping to fuel that. We can't apply those in the summer. And so I had started looking a little bit more into some of those laws and why they were in place. And I actually started to find some, I don't know if the word is discrepancy or things that just weren't logical to me. Why is this group singled out as not subject to the nitrogen ban? Why? And I start thinking of why that could be. And that makes me start to question things. And of course, this is the government because these are laws that have been enacted. And so I wanted to meet with someone that I could speak to about this and put it on the podcast. And so I put some feelers out, and I got some good recommendations for some very knowledgeable folks at the University of Florida who would know why these laws are in place, what studies were done to justify the need for the laws, and then why are there these loopholes. Because I really want to understand, I really want to learn, because I've always been a rule follower my whole life. I was in the Air Force. I was just a rule follower. We did a lot of stupid stuff in the Air Force. We didn't really question why. Now, years later, I understand why we did a lot of what we did. But nowadays, I'm not so much, I'm a rule follower, but I'm also somebody that starts to question the rules. And I think that happens when you get to be in your 50s, right? It's just you start looking back on things. You start looking at the world in a different way, or you got a half of your life over, more than probably half of your life. I don't know. You start looking at things. You kind of enter a new arc or a new phase. And I think that's what I'm doing. I'm entering a new arc of the lawn care nut. So updates will be coming. Hopefully I'll get somebody on from the University of Florida, and I think it'll be really good. I know I'm going to learn a lot, and I will do it here on the podcast so you guys can learn a lot. So stay tuned for that coming up here, hopefully in the next couple 2-3 weeks. All right. I wanted to come in here as a kind of first segment to this podcast and do a little follow-up on something I did last week, which was talking about pre-germinating grass seeds. So we're going back to my cool season, folks. Obviously, you're still in the throes of seeding almost all over the country. It's not too late. I mean, even Wisconsin, you got plenty of time left. Far northeast, you got plenty of time left. We're still in the beginning of September, so nobody is too late. They really aren't. Maybe if you're in Montana, maybe way up there. I don't know. I don't think so. Just look at your soil temps, right? Get the Yard Mastery app. Look at your soil temp. If your soil temp is somewhere around 65-ish, 70-ish, you're fine. Even if you're down to 60, you're good. You got time. You just use more ryegrass. If you're a little further north, the strategy, use a little bit more ryegrass up front. Now, another thing because it germinates faster, but one thing you can do, though, is pre-germinate grass seed. So here's what I'll basically tell you. A lot of folks commented and really helped me out. I'm just going to read some of the comments that I got on that video, because they really helped me to understand how I was actually approaching the whole thing incorrectly. I was under the assumption that when you pre-germinate grass seed, that you are going all the way until actual germination. That's why it's called pre-germinate. But no, it's you're just wetting it really good for a couple, 2-3 days before you plant the seed. So here's the thing. If you think about it, right, what you're doing when you plant, when I tell you a traditional way to plant seed, whether you slit seed or you aerate it and overseed and then put coverings, I tell you got to water every day, 3 times a day for the first 21 days and keep the lawn constantly wet. That's the key, because you got to keep the seed constantly wet. Now, it's okay if it dries out here and there in between. It's smart, it knows, but it's going to have to be wet really, really well in the beginning as a way to kind of wake it up. Because think about seeds in the ground. Let's just think about, any other kind of seed, a weed seed that's in the ground. So crabgrass seeds that might be down in the ground. So they fall off a plant naturally. They nestle down in. Some stay up higher in the soil. Some stay down lower. But what happens over time, and I don't know if y'all know this, but and I've learned this term. It's called the seed bank. There is a bank of seeds from crabgrass in your lawn. Now, if you haven't been taking care of the crabgrass over the last few years and you're starting fresh, maybe you just moved into your house, there's been crabgrass problems there for the last 20 years, you got a big seed bank built up, right? Now, not every seed that was dropped this year is going to germinate next year. Some will sit in the soil for 2, 3 years, 4 years. I don't know if there's been studies done on crabgrass specifically, but I do know that if you are to start a strong prodiamine pre-emergent program in a cool season lawn that's had really bad crabgrass problems, you can eliminate the problem in about 3 years. Even the worst crabgrass problem you can eliminate by using pre-emergence and smart post-emergence to eliminate breakthrough. In 3 years, you'll burn the seed bank out of crabgrass. Now, what will inevitably happen is you'll get a record year of a record year of rain, so where water gets deeper than it ever has before, or it stays wetter deeper than it has before. That can happen, so once every 10 years or so. Or you can get a record drought where the soil dries out and cracks much, much lower than it ever has. One of those two extremes will wake up the deeper seed bank. I'm sure maybe there's a term for this, right? But there'll be crabgrass seeds deeper that have been laying dormant for years, but some weird freak weather event gets like the frickin' cicadas, right, every 7 years or whatever it is. So that can happen with crabgrass, and I've seen that when I worked at True Green. I worked there for 15 years. I saw it happen twice. We had 2 years that were real bad droughts, and lawns that never had crabgrass all of a sudden had some. Now, it wasn't terrible, but they would get it, especially around edges, right? So what am I getting at? There's a seed bank there. And some seed gets the right amount of moisture and germinates, but not all of it. That's what I guess that's a point I'm making, is it's not every seed that you drop this year, that gets dropped this year, is going to germinate next year when it comes to crabgrass. Okay, that's what I'm trying to say is there's seed at all depths, there's seed at all areas, and sometimes it takes a couple years for certain seeds to get the right amount of moisture to wake up and go. The temperature, the conditions, all of that has to be right for all of the seeds to germinate over time. I think that's clear. How does this relate to pre-germinating grass seed? Well, when we're seeding a lawn and we're gonna water it, I tell you to keep it wet as much as you can for the first few days, and for sure the first 3 weeks you want to keep it as wet as you can. It's because the seeds have to feel enough moisture around them in order to even wake up. There's some sort of something built into them that they know they might get watered once and they don't do anything. They might get watered once now, maybe get watered 5 days later. They're drying out in between. Those seeds won't germinate. They won't do it. Now there's a certain amount of times that could happen before the seed just dies. But what I'm getting at is they don't do that. But once they get enough wetness in a row, once there's enough consecutive hours of wetness, then the seed says to itself, okay, now I can germinate. Feels like there's enough water here. All right, so back to the lawn. When you're watering the lawn, even the best watering plan is not going to soak all the seeds all the time. There will be moisture around. There will be humidity around, especially if you use a seed covering to help hold humidity in, and the seed will sense that, and over time it will germinate. However, if you dunk the seed in water and it is 100% coated in water for 3 or 4 days, that's so much water that it says, holy shnikes, we better germinate now and get rooted in and get going, or we're going to get washed away. I'm pretty sure that's what the seed thinks to itself. So basically what you're doing is you're speeding up nature. Nature, and this goes back to the crabgrass analogy, nature understands that the seed is not going to be completely soaked perfectly and nestled in this wonderful, warm, amniotic bath of water, right? That doesn't happen in the real world. In the soil, it dries out. It gets cold. It gets hot. It gets sunk deeper. It gets pulled up. It gets moved around by a squirrel. All of these things, all these factors happen, but eventually it's enough water hits it, the temperatures are right, and that grass seed germinates. Makes sense? But when you do that, we'll call it amniotic fluid for grass seeds, right? It's that warm, nurturing water that tells that seed, we got you, man. It's time to, head out. It's time to get going. That's what that water does. And so that's what pre-germinating is. So you're not actually keeping this. Man, that was bad. Some of y'all are going to be like, bro, you went on a super tangent on that one. But anyway, it's not about actually germinating the seed. It's not about getting even it to show green or to show any root. No, it's about just doing, I would say, I mean, from the consensus I've been getting, some people do it for 2 or 3 days. Some people do it for 5 or 8, but I don't think anybody does it more than 7 or 8. And if you have perennial ryegrass, I would do it for 1. Because a lot of people were telling me that, and I'll put some comments on the screen so you can see them if you're watching on YouTube. But a lot of folks were telling me, or several folks were telling me that their perennial rye germinated too fast for them. In other words, if perennial rye will germinate in 3 days on the ground, it's germinating in hours, like overnight when it's soaked in water. Whereas Kentucky bluegrass that takes 21 days to germinate or 28 days to germinate is germinating in 6 or 7 or 8. When it's soaked for, 3 or 4 or 5, maybe 6 days. So that's what you're doing. And I just misunderstood that. That was my bad. I watched all these videos and I think I got information overload, which I know happens. You watch too many videos on the same subject and you stop seeing the nuance in it. You stop really picking up on the strategy and you're more thinking about the mechanical things. All right, well, I got to get these buckets and I got to get these paint strainers and I got to weigh out 5 pounds of each and then I got to put it in the water and then I got to change it every 12 hours. And you stop thinking about the why behind what you're doing and you just make it a mechanical thing that you do. So the why behind it is not to actually germinate. I missed that. It's not to actually germinate it. It's to speed up the germination so that when it does get down on the ground, it's already been in that 5-day soak. And it's like, oh, heck yeah, bro, I'm ready to go. I feel soil around me. Thank you very much. Let's go. And Vince the Longineer sent me a video where he said he did spread it with Milorganite, had no problem. It wasn't wet, not like that. So apparently the Milorganite, they put drying agent in Milorganite and they put it in those giant baking vats or whatever. And so apparently whatever's in there is drying out the grass seed pretty good for you too. So I would tell you that if I did do a seeding project now, and I'm going to do a Provista seeding project, I don't know if I'm going to get one in this fall. We were trying, but it kind of fell through. But we're definitely I already have one set up for spring because you're not supposed to seed in spring, but Provista being glyphosate tolerant, you can do it. Anyway, I will be pre-germinating. And in fact, I'm going to tell you that if I did any type of seeding starting over, because we don't overseed with Provista, so a burn down and start over, I'm going to always recommend you pre-germinate. Even though I have never even done it before, I can trust my fellow YouTubers that I've seen their results now. And again, I still think they all did it for views. Of course they did. That's the business we're in. But it does seem like a viable strategy, and it really does work. I still think some of the other things I pointed out are viable, mainly meaning that it's extra steps. And if you did have to, if you got a big rain, especially if you're pushing your pre-germination up to 7 or 8 days, and now you got 2 days of rain, now you're extended to 10 days. There's some things that you actually take some risks with, but I think it's worth it to pre-germinate anyway, because I'll take you to a Facebook post now. And we're going to see this a lot. And I want to point it out so that this guy knows he's not alone, but then everybody else also knows, you are definitely not alone. These are normal things that happen. And I'm talking about washouts. When you're somebody that had to start at bare dirt, and it could be from new construction, there's a lot of reasons why you could have to start from bare dirt. It's not my recommendations, but it does happen. And this guy here, Carl, man, he's showing some pictures of washouts that he got. Now, it was 5 days ago. I actually commented this morning and said, hey, man, tell us, how did it come back? Let's see what he says. He says, it's coming along and not as bad as it initially looked. So this is cool. Carl, I hope you're okay with me sharing this, man. You're going to help a lot of people because they panic. And I'm looking at Carl. He put up videos and everything. His lawn, it looks like his entire seed is washing down the road. And it's a beautiful property. Nice house. It's gorgeous, but it just looks terrible. And he put this up 5 days ago. Nothing like a pop-up storm to mess up your renovation. crying faces, crying emojis. So I said, how did it turn out? That's not loud that it's been 5 days ago because I just did this. And he says, Alan, it's coming along, not as bad as it initially looked. I've ordered more seed to fill in the washed away spots. I worked really hard on grading, and unfortunately now there are a lot of low spots, which will need to be addressed later on. It's been a week, and I put seed down. Here's how it looks this morning, and he's got a video of how it looks. So it just basically, he's got it all smoothed back out. So Carl, you know, the thing about what he did is he spent all that time on grading. He knew that property back to front because he spent the time grading it out, and it does. He's got his pre-pictures here. It looks perfect, just perfect. So now he's got low spots, washout spots. Man, it's a nightmare. Carl, I wish you the best, man. You're going to help a lot of people because there are a lot of people are going to go through this, and you came out of it here with a good attitude. And hopefully, I can't tell from the video you put up here a couple hours ago, but hopefully you're getting some germination now because that's what you got. You got it. Once you get some roots in there, that'll help you. And so this goes back to the pre-germinating. I think it's a way to help hedge against those big storms like Carl had to face here. And by the way, Carl may have pre-germinated. I didn't get enough chance to ask him a total bunch of information. But pre-germinating, you got to realize if you got to put Kentucky bluegrass down and it's going to take 21 days to germinate, 21 to 28, that's 3 weeks of risking gully washers. You're going to get one. So it's probably better to pre-germinate if you can take that down to 7 days. You get it, right? You're just hedging your bets, less risk. The other thing, though, is if you can, at all possible, don't take your lawn down to dirt. Again, I think this is new construction that Carl was dealing with here, but don't take your lawn down to bare dirt. Instead, burn it down to dead and then scalp it to 1 inch and leave the material there and then slit seed into the dead material because that'll help to hold things in. Now, it's not a foolproof. I still recommend you even use top dressing of peat moss or something on top of that, but it will help. It certainly will help. Now, again, I understand he graded, right? So if you have to do grading, if you have major low spots, like I think Carl did, he took it down and he's grading it that way, you're going to have to scrape it down to dirt. You can't do that. But if your lawn doesn't need any major leveling or anything like that, then, you know, probably best to scalp it to 1 inch, leave some stuff there to help with that gully washer. However, know this, if you read the comments on Carl's post, you'll hear other people saying, here, Garrett says, I planted 100% Kentucky bluegrass, and this happened 3 times during its long germination process. Turned out great, though. I used a slice seeder. So he slice seeded into dirt and had 3 major washouts, but it eventually turned out. And this is what I want to tell you. And there's a bunch. Here's another guy, Brian. I had that happen to me last spring and had to reseed a lot of it. But see, Brian's lawn is fine now. So, man, this is also where the easy blankets can come in. Lots of options. Man, I'll be doing some different projects next year in cool season. I think I told you guys every other year I kind of do something a little bit different, or every other year I go up and do more cool season content and I travel. Well, next year's a cool season year. This year was a hang back and take care of some personal stuff here at the house year. So a warm season focused year with some cool season grass. Next year will be a little bit more cool season focused because I'll travel more. So all of that to say, keep the faith, guys. Keep watering. No matter how many washouts you've had, no matter how bad you think it is, it's okay to go back out, rake out some areas, throw some more grass seed down, but don't go crazy. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Don't stop watering. Keep going. You're going to realize that grass, especially cool season grass, is really easy to grow. Even in the midst of major washouts, you're going to still have results enough that you're going to look at it and go, wow, I'm really impressed that it did this well, even with all those washouts. It's not going to be perfect. But you can always reseed areas next spring, spot seeding. Okay, I don't recommend spring seeding, but sometimes you got to do it, especially if you did a full renovation. Understand that you're not going to have those perfect conditions where you get this perfect lawn the first time, especially if you're burning down to dirt. It's a process. It's something to keep working on. It's just like working out your body. Man, you're always constantly working out you have times when you're super lean and you feel lean and you got veins coming out, right? And your Death Star delts got striations in them and you're like, man, I'm lean right now. And then there's other times where you drink too many beers for too many nights in a row and all of a sudden you're going back up to your 34 waist pantalones. You know what I mean? And you're feeling bloated and but that muscle's under there. You know, that lean body's under there. You got to get some things right. So it's the same thing with the lawn, man. There's ups and downs. There's bulk days. There's cut days. There's all kinds. There's injuries. There's disease. Hopefully none of you have insects in your body. Maybe some of you do. Yeah, so lots of great analogies there. The whole thing is keep the faith and keep hoping for the best. Here's another one that came out of our Florida Lawn Care Nuts Facebook group. This relates back to exactly what I was talking about at the very beginning of the podcast, but this is great. We're going to bring this up again because I want to hammer this home. So in Florida, we are coming off of the wettest season of the year. And now, if you live on the east coast of Florida, you're coming off 2 super wet seasons. They got destroyed last year, records. And I don't know if this year's a record on the east coast of Florida, but it is definitely a heavy rain year. West coast of Florida, record rains, heavy rains. He says here, Joseph says, I have some fungus from a swale zone holding water from our crazy 9 inches of rain last week. He got 9 inches last week. I don't think he says where he's at. He's in Florida, though. I don't know what else to treat the area with. I hit it with Headway G, and then I sprayed Eagle 20 EW last week. That's 2 different fungicides. That was a good plan. He goes, I'm not really sure what else to do. And what you can see is the corner of the lawn that borders the sidewalk and his mulch beds is all brown. And what that is, it's not necessarily fungus. Yes, there is probably some fungus there, probably some gray leaf spot, but that's not really the main thing that is causing this. And again, for those of you on YouTube, you will be able to see the video version of this. I should see if I can put video versions up everywhere else, like on Spotify or whatever. But on YouTube, on Lawns Across America, you will see this clearly. This corner is exactly what I talked about in the previous part of the podcast, where what he has is root washout. The grass is actually etiolated or thinned out, etiolated. That's a great word taught to us by Cassie many years ago. But etiolated means thinned out. And the grass, because it doesn't have roots to tack itself down, it can't knit together tight. That's what roots do, by the way. The stolons all knit together, but when they all root in together, it gets pulled together tight. Those roots and those stolons, they knit together and they pull together tight. I want you to think of a bodybuilder flexing his pecs. That's everything's pulling together, right? You can just feel that. Well, when the grass is washed out, when the roots are literally washed out, and Joe, I'm talking to Joe here that left the Facebook post, I bet if you go out there, I bet that grass will pull up really easy. I bet it's not even really well rooted, especially the closer you get down to that corner. And that is because that flowing water, that's constant standing water there, and he even says it's a swale zone. The water flows right across there. It just washes the roots right out. There is absolutely nothing you can do about that. The only thing that I would do, if I could, if you're not in a blackout zone, is I'd put down some foliar absorbed nitrogen, because that will just help to green it up, which is what I really mostly care about. But it is a good idea to give this grass some nitrogen. Everybody gets so scared. Even if there's a little bit of disease in there, I don't care. Think about this. When you get sick, when you get a disease, do you stop eating? No, what do? You take more vitamins, man. You make sure you're getting all of your 3 hots in a cot. You feed a cold, son. And so I'm not telling you to dose this lawn with massive amounts of nitrogen, but maybe like quarter pound, third pound of nitrogen foliar applied. Man, that would be good. Just really help that out. And I think that would help it to kind of make its way through until things dry up, and then the stolons will tack back down. They'll root back in. But that's what that is. So while I do think there's some disease there, it's not about applying more fungicides. This is really about time. And one of those things where the weather is just going to win. The weather is undefeated. And when we have, like he got 9 inches of rain last week, think about all the water flow. It's a swale. It's an area that's flowing to a swale. So think about 9 inches of water that fell, and all of the water from his house on this side of the house is collecting and flowing across this area. That's a lot of water flow. Water flow cut the Grand Canyon, broskies. You know what I mean? So if it'll cut the Grand Canyon, it'll definitely cut the roots out of your St. Augustine grass. And that is exactly what we're seeing here. So if you're in Florida, and I hope you'll share this clip of this video, if you're in Florida and you have these areas that are brown like this on corners, it's probably due to water flow, and there really is no need to apply anything except maybe some foliar applied nitrogen if you're not in a blackout zone, or if you're hearing this and it's October 1st or after. I'll give you links in the description below. We actually have a new product coming out that's perfect for this. It's called In Charge. Well, it's not perfect for this, but it's good for this. It would work for this. Actually, 700 green effect would actually be perfect for this. But either way, something foliar applied, even 501 spoon juice is foliar absorbed. I'll give you some links to it. That's all you got to do. And you spray it on the whole lawn, by the way, not just the damaged area. You spray it on the whole lawn. Maybe you go a little heavier handed in the damaged area, give it a little bit more good stuff. But pretty normal here in Florida, and it's just one of those environmental things that you really can't hedge against. You just have to kind of deal with it and hope for the best. All right, so I know this is a podcast, but I wanted to come in here and provide some additional content. I'm out here standing right now in the Freedom Factory. This is the east side Citra Blue St. Augustine grass. Looking great, hasn't had any nitrogen, since June 1st. Well, really early May is when I actually did it. And it could use some. This is what it looks like after having been hit with the Command topsoil. We'll talk about that down the road. But in this video, I've also been talking about wet feed areas and what St. Augustine grass looks like when it's overly wet. This is a perfect example of that. I'm looking at a field of beautiful St. Augustine grass, but right in front of me, there's some areas that are brown. And these are areas that I know because I document. These are areas that have been holding water for a long time. When I say a long time, I mean for a few days at a time. They've been literally underwater. The reason I know that is because I haven't been able to mow. I've been coming out here checking, and there's always a bunch of standing water here to the point where I can't mow. And so this is what's happened. Some of the St. Augustine has died out because it's just too wet. And so you can look down in here and it looks, and what people will say, well, that must be disease. But what I'm just looking at is there's a lot of green St. Augustine grass in here, but in between a lot of it has died. And as you guys will remember, I tell you the growth nature of St. Augustine grass are long, thick stolons. And those long, thick stolons weave together to create this dense mat of turf. On the flip side of that, when St. Augustine grass dies, I'm trying to pull out a stolon as we do this, but the Citra Blue stolons are extremely stoloniferous. They are so thick. Anyway, when those stolons are all woven together and one dies, it makes this kind of strange looking pattern that you could think, well, that's disease because it's this weird looking shape. But really what that brown weird looking shape is, it's just stolons that were all woven together. One of those died. And so you're seeing it reveal in these strange woven patterns that look like disease, but really it's just a stolon that died from too much water. The other thing is they thin out when there's too much water. They just tend to thin out because they're not growing. So some die, some thin out. Etiolation is the term. Anyway, you can see brown areas that I'm looking at, and this is not disease, nothing to do with that. It's just wet feet. There's another one over here I'll show you. Wait, here's another area, been holding water, and it just has this brown tinge to it. I mean, you can probably see on the camera, it's a low spot anyway, but it's been holding water. And I've got just lots of other areas that I could point out all around the track where the St. Augustine is brown like this that have been holding water for several weeks now. And so that's what you're going to get. And a lot of you are seeing various results of this in your lawn. Maybe you don't have it like this where we literally had 2.5 or 3 weeks of just standing water there. Maybe you didn't have it that bad, but you had a little bit lesser than this, but you still had a lot more water and you lost some areas. What I'm saying is a lot of this is just from the rainy season. The weather is undefeated. The weather always wins. So, all right, well, we were talking about it. Here I am now on the west side. Same Citra Blue St. Augustine grass, just the other side of the track. We've always had problems with water over here. They have been bad this year, and we've actually got full-on loss on this side. So whereas on the other side, we just had stress and some areas dying and thinning out. And by the way, to expand on why does it thin out, the reason it thins out is because it's in a situation where its growth has been interrupted. It's the same with shade. Think about with shade. What happens when grass gets in the shade? It thins out, right? And the reason it does that is because it's like, oh, we can't support these big fat plants. There's not enough sunlight. So what we'll do is we'll thin out and we'll try to just survival of the fittest. So we don't have to support these giant plants. So because we have less sunlight, right? Well, the same is when it's in water. When the feet are wet and it's in water and it can no longer operate because I don't know what it's called, but whenever the soil is just too wet, it just can't grow, right? There's a balance there. So whenever it's too wet for too long, it can't grow. So it's like, well, this seems like it's going to go for a long time. It's been a couple weeks. We've been in wet feet. Let's do this. Let's thin out these big plants. Let's thin out so maybe just a few of us can survive through till when the conditions improve, right? So that's kind of what it is. The flooding will continue until morale improves or something like that. So anyway, this area is actually still pretty wet. It's still actually very wet over here. This soil is soaked. So it still hasn't dried out at all, even after 3 days. And it even smells sour. You can just tell. Ugh. But over there, that soil is sufficiently dry to where
Again, I can mow, of course, but the grass hasn't died. But over here, there it is, wet St. Augustine grass, not disease, just areas that stayed wet too long from wet feet. So there you go. There's the update from the Freedom Factory. As we're out here, the Northbridge Bermuda is looking beautiful. I did 50% command topsoil and 20 tons of sand, leveling sand out there. Still got to put the video together for that. But that Bermuda, and I've been mowing it with the zero turn right here with unsharp blades. It still looks great. I'll show it to you behind my back. The zoysia back there, the Citra zoysia, the Citrazoy, it's almost all dead. That whole area is flooded. So ever since we had Irma, was it Irma? Debbie. Irma was many years ago. Debbie, ever since Debbie came through, that dropped like 20 inches of water in 24, 48 hours, something like that. You saw the video Cletus did where he was out there, you know, playing around in the flood and stuff. Well, over here it flooded as well. It did drain out eventually, but what it did when it did that is it lowered a lot of places. Like a lot of these places that were not sunken are now sunken. And so it's gotten to a point where there's not, like, I can't just go put in a drain or two. It's like, put French drains in. No, we need somebody out here that actually understands stormwater management. Because the whole topography of the area around here has also changed. The water flow from all the places around us that used to be farms that are not farms anymore, I'm sure that's changed where the water goes. There's also a giant concrete pad in the middle here that wasn't originally in here that changes the way water flows, and this is just a giant bowl. So it gets to a point where they need somebody that's a specialist, an engineer, to come in here and understand how to control that. So the zoysia over there has suffered and it's not gonna come back. I mean, literally that's a whole pit of mud over there. You can't drive on it or walk on it or anything. So they got a sump in there that they're trying to sump it out to get it to the drains. So anyway, St. Augustine looking great, Bermuda looking great. Even though the St. Augustine does have some low spots that it didn't have before, it's still okay. It's not anything that it can't get through. It's just these few brown areas that we're gonna monitor, but it's fine. Bermuda over there, perfect. No drainage issues. So really blessed that backstretch Bermuda, Northbridge Bermuda, it drains perfectly. Man, it does good. So we got the good news here. We got good news and we got challenging news with the lawn. So, all right, I'm gonna finish enjoying the mow because that's how I roll.
All right, finally for this podcast, I wanted to talk about something that is one of my favorite parts of the fall content rush or the content blitz, and it's the nitrogen blitz. I love that. Now, I don't take credit for that one. I didn't invent the nitrogen blitz. I didn't invent that term. I wasn't the first to make a video. In fact, I don't think I've ever even made a video about the nitrogen blitz, but I sure have commented on it a lot. This might be another one that Jesse got, Jesse Lawn Life. That dude, man, he's Mr. Understanding what the trends are going to be. I didn't watch a lot of videos on this one this time. Something I've seen over the years, people talking about. Now, I kind of have always done what you might call a nitrogen blitz, but let me tell you what that is anyway. So what nitrogen blitz is it can be done on cool season lawns, and I'm going to tell you that it can be done on warm season lawns too, but a little different. But for cool season lawns, what the nitrogen blitz is, you can start at any time now. Whenever, pretty much fall time, man, just do it. You're basically just pumping up your lawn and taking advantage of the fall growth curve. So you got your fall growth curve that starts as soon as your soil temperatures kind of fall below 70. Get the Yard Mastery app. Even if you don't use it for anything else, use it to get your soil temps. It'll give you the soil temps at your house. If you put your actual address in, we have Latin long for actual addresses that we can give you the soil temp at your house. Technology is great. And so with that, when the soil temps fall below 70, that's kind of a key that it's like, oh yeah, that's that environmental factor that the lawn is going to say, yeah, it's time for me to get out of dormancy. Water helps too, though. And typically when the soil temperatures are falling, that means outside air temperatures are falling, which also means rain clouds are building again. And so you're going to start getting a little bit of rain. So moisture coupled with temperature, soil temperatures fall below 70 are what are going to push your lawn to start growing again, especially if you're coming out of a tough summer, whether it's you had areas that went dormant and died off, or you had, I don't know, whatever it could be, right? Even if you did aeration and overseeding, you can nitrogen blitz. Just wait 30 days and start your nitrogen blitz. Start your nitrogen blitz 30 days after your aeration overseeding. Nope, you have my permission. Push the new grass. Let it know the environment that it's in. Bring it into the Ironworks gym as an infant and make it start working out. Give it that creatine. Give it that pre-workout, baby grass. Get your ass in here and start benching, boy. You know what I mean? You don't have to wait. You can go now. We'll feed you now. I'm going to create you as an athlete now. So what Nitrogen Blitz is, everybody's going to do it a little different, but the consensus seems to be, depending how often you want to spray, but it's essentially 1 pound of nitrogen a month, and you break that up over 2 sessions or 4. So you could do a 1/4 pound of nitrogen every week, all the way from now until your soil temperatures fall below 40. Once your soil temperatures fall below 40, consistently, not the first time they dip, but consistently when they fall below 40, and you notice that you can pretty much do your last application. You call that your winterizer. Flagship is great, and you're done. But so from now until then, so from 70, soil temp 70 down to soil temp 40, you hit your lawn with a 1/4 pound of nitrogen every week. Now, this is typically done with liquids because with the Blitz, we're really wanting to get the foliar absorption, so it just gets right in. It's not going to flush the lawn too much because it's low amounts of nitrogen often rather than a whole lot of nitrogen all at once, which I'll talk about that too because I think some of y'all don't realize what slow release is in granulars. But either way, it's a Nitrogen Blitz. Now, some of you are not going to want to spray every week. By the way, your lawn will be super green. If you want to know what to Nitrogen Blitz with, 700 Green Effect. And just go. And because you're going to get some iron in there too to give you the blue color. Man, all foliar absorbed. You don't have to water it in. 501 Spoon Juice, also excellent choice. That's got some humic in there and some sea kelp, which helps. So that one has foliar absorption, and then you just water it in afterwards. So it's a little of both. 1801 Green Punch works great too if you want to do that. So there's, we have a lot of different liquid fertilizers. We have a new one coming out called In Charge. That's immediately available nitrogen, quick release nitrogen, which quick release was definitely not my nickname in college. But I don't even like the word quick release. It's just immediately available nitrogen. It's not coated or it's in liquids. They do something to stabilize it or whatever to make it slow release. I don't understand the chemistry there, but it's just urea, this In Charge. And so you actually spray it on, but you water it in 5 minutes later because it does both too. Foliar absorb and root absorb. So that's your Nitrogen Blitz. 1/4 pound a week all the way through, or 1/2 pound every 2 weeks. And I think that's probably what most people do, is they'll do a 1/2 pound of nitrogen every 2 weeks. Now, here's the thing. If you're applying Flagship, and by the way, what that'll do is it'll make your lawn so thick and so green, and man, just start mowing the crap out of it. Listen, your lawn, if you Nitrogen Blitz, use 700 Green Effect if you want, or and again, low rate with that if you're going to do it every week. Or really just use 501 Spoon Juice. Just get some 501 Spoon Juice from my deal and put that down every 2 weeks. Just watch what your lawn does. You don't have to use any other fertilizer. You could even do it every week. So you could use 3 ounces every week or 6 ounces per 1,000 every 2 weeks. Whichever one you want to do. Use 501 Spoon Juice. Awesome. Anyway, your lawn will be so thick, so green, you won't even understand it. Spoon Juice has some iron in it too. That's the Nitrogen Blitz. Now, here's the thing. My regular programs, if you're on my regular Yard Mastery program from the app, or you've got my ebook or whatever, and you're using my program in there, which is the same as in the app. The program that's in the app is actually the same program that's in the ebook. We just programmed it into an app, right? And then did some variables and added in the soil test so you can get a custom program, all that. But it's essentially my same programs that I wrote years ago. They're just in the app now. That's what that is. If you get that app and you have cool season grass and you're not seeding, it's going to basically tell you to put down Flagship once every 4 to 5 weeks. Okay. Now that's close. Flagship gives you 3/4 pounds of nitrogen, not a full pound. So you'd get 3/4 pounds of nitrogen every month. However, 50% of the nitrogen in Flagship is slow released. It's polymer coated urea. It's urea, which is the same urea we were just talking about, which is just a nitrogen source, an excellent nitrogen source. It's urea that is coated with a polymer that scientifically it breaks down over time to release that nitrogen slowly over time. That's the term slow release. So 50% of the nitrogen that's in Flagship is immediately available, and that's some ammonium sulfate that's giving us that and some urea. And then we also have 50% of the other 50% of the nitrogen is slow release. It's polymer coated urea, and it's released over the next 45 days. Okay? So you get immediate release to green you up, but then 45 days of that other, what's half of 3/4? 0.5 times 0.75 equals 0.37. So basically 0.37 pounds of nitrogen, so over 1/3 pound of nitrogen goes out right away. And then the other third pound is released slowly over 45 days. That's called a release curve. Okay? That's pretty cool. So if you're nitrogen blitzing and you just want to use granular, you can just do flagship once a month, and there'll be some overlap there, right? Which is part of the program anyway, because we don't ever want the lawn to go pale. We want it to stay green. We don't want it to go green, pale, green, pale. No, we want it green, 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 greener. And so that's why we do that. So you have 45-day release curve, but you're applying 3/4 pound a month. So there's some overlap there. You could do that from now to the end of the year, and that's a granular nitrogen blitz, and you only have to do it once a month. That's one way to do it if you want to do it granular. So basically what I'm getting at is if you have been on my regular programs anyway, you've been nitrogen blitzing in a way because I give half the nitrogen slow release for you. So instead of you having to spray every week, no, you just put it down now, and it'll release over the, again, 0.37 of a pound will be immediately available for you now, and then over the next 45 days, the other 0.37 releases for you. That's your nitrogen blitz. So it's really something I've been doing already. I never called it that. So kudos to the guys that started calling it that. I don't know if that's something they took from golf or not, or if they made that up. Somebody let me know. It's kind of cool to see the origin of that term. I love it when terminology makes it through our community, and so I'm just always interested in finding out who invented it, who made that one up. That's kind of cool. That's fun. So any of you that have any more information on the nitrogen blitzing, or maybe you've done it differently, leave me comments below. You can see I like to learn things too. Maybe I'll find a new way to do it. As far as warm season turf goes, I'm going to nitrogen blitz because I've been in a blackout, and I'm going to use liquids because we are still going to probably be getting rain. Just because you get to October 1st and your Florida blackout ends, it's not like, oh, there's no more rain. We still want to follow best practice, and if we know there's a chance for thunderstorms, you still don't, just because it's after September 30th, the fertilizer can still get washed away in a thunderstorm on October 2nd, right? So that's why but the law allows it now, so I'm going to probably use liquids with foliar absorption because it just seems logical there'd be a whole lot less loss when you're nitrogen blitzing and only putting out 1/4 pound of nitrogen, once a week, and it's all in liquid form, so you get a lot of foliar absorption. That seems to me like a safer bet to get less runoff, but to get the same result out of my lawn. So I'm going to nitrogen blitz coming out of my summer blackout here. Now, for those of you that are in the rest of the country where you're not Florida and you're going to be going dormant in the next couple months, you're going to want to still have a little bit of nitrogen, but you're going to want to go higher potassium, again, starting to prepare for summer. So that's for fall and getting into your dormant period in winter. So your big thing is prodiamine, warm season turf, pretty much everywhere else besides South Florida. Prodiamine sometime in October. Again, the app will tell you the best time for that as soil temps fall below 70. And then if you want to do a little bit of low nitrogen, 7020 with high potassium and some magnesium in there, if you want to do that, that's a good idea to do in the fall here. You can do that a couple of times as long as you're still mowing at least every 10 days. If you get to the point where you're not mowing every 10 days, you then stop fertilizing. Biostimulants, of course, are always great. RGS, Humic 12, Aerate, always great this time of year because those are for the soil, and those will help to chelate nutrients out of the soil naturally to help keep your lawn green and awake. So lots of fun stuff there. Figure we finish it off there this week. A little over an hour on this podcast, but fun to finish it off there with a little nitrogen blitzing. And again, if you do something a little bit different or you've used a different strategy, let me know. With that, I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you so much for watching or listening to the Lawns Across America podcast. I plan to keep these going, keep them out for you. So if you're on YouTube, leave me comments and questions below or things that you'd like me to cover in the podcast. And if I have enough knowledge on it, maybe I will. Until then, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the lawn.